Hello everybody and welcome to my video about me making a carton model of the Castello di Prampero. High above Magnano Riviera stands the Castello di Prampero, first recorded in 1265. It is a fortress guarding the hill between the Rio Rosso and Rio Prampero streams. It takes its name from the Prampero family, feudal lords first documented in 1130, who served the patriarchs of Aquileia for centuries. Destroyed by the devastating 1976 earthquake, the castle is now being carefully restored with ongoing excavation, revealing its original medieval layout, bringing this noble Friulian stronghold back to life. So let's get started. Based on pictures and videos found online, I could create layouts and plans for the castle. I did two views, one from the side, one from the top. I took the measurements, and the measurements allowed me to get the relations between the sizes of the buildings. Now we can simply go ahead and start cutting out the pieces of the buildings, the walls, fundaments of this beautiful model. What I do is I take simple carton, I have my pen and I have some guiding material that allows me to take all the measurements from my planning period and carve out the carton shapes. Once this is done, I use a cutter or a scissor to cut out all the parts. This is a lot of nitty-gritty work. It requires to be as precise as possible, but you also should not be too precise, because as you will see in the video, many things will change along the way and you will have to be and stay adaptable. Nonetheless, a rough outline of whatever you are trying to build is always helpful to get started and get a basic structure up. Now, in order to create the shapes, I slightly cut into the cornerstones of the buildings. This allows me to fold the carton easier without damaging the carton itself and making those rectangles awkward. Voila! This is the final shape of the outer walls. We are continuing with those elements to complete the structure. Once the rough outline of the buildings is done, I carve out a platform to put the buildings on. This will from now on be my point of reference when it comes to sizes and relation of the sizes of each construction step I'm doing. Now we continue gluing everything together. I'm using an instant glue that holds together things very tightly and dries up very quickly. This allows you to get the basic shapes all together and to be ready to move on to the next step. You will see throughout the video that I'm repositioning the elements all back together in a very rough outline. This allows me to understand how the relations between the sizes of the buildings and elements are and if they look appropriate. With this, we can move on to the layout. We start working on the fundaments. Or respectively, I should rather say, we are creating the highest layer of the hill on which the castle sits. This allows us to have a permanent platform that guides our future sense making of the whole object. As you can see, I put the platform already on steels. This is the bottom of the platform. This allows me to get a feeling for the elevation of the castle in relation to the rest of the model. And with this, we can start coming to an end of the basic structures. We're building the roofs. Now, unless you're a very good mathematician, the roofs are always a bit of improvisation. As you can see, I'm putting out some support structure onto the basic walls. This allows me then to carve out the roofs themselves. You can see the roofs have very awkward angles, so it forces me to continuously adapt the sizes. This is very flexible, adaptable, and hands-on. There is not much planning going into this. Whatever fits, fits. Now, since this takes a while, let me talk to you about the castle itself. Standing within the municipality of Magnano Riviera in Udine province, Italy, the castle sits about 18 kilometers north of Udine city, reachable via National Road number 13. With Artegna, a stop on the Udine-Tarvisio rail line, is the nearest station. In 1976, an earthquake reduced the structure to ruins. Since then, restoration efforts have progressed by clearing away the debris from surviving walls, a process that has revealed the castle's original architecture layout and shed light on the details of its founding. What's striking is how closely the physical remains match the historical written record. The very first documentary mention of the fortress appears in April 1265, describing it as located on the river in front of the fortress of Brambergo, a phrase preserved in a scholarly glossary of Friulian place names. Now, this beautiful castle is positioned on a hill. Two watercourses frame the hill on which the castle rises. The Rio Rosso to the north, flowing east to west and sometimes wrongly labeled as Rio Bosso, and the Rio Prampero, tracing a northeast to southwest pass. This natural configuration made the site ideal for building a fortification, be it for military defense, settlement growth, protection, or other purposes. The story of human presence here begins in Roman times, when the hill set along the route joining Julium Carnicum, today's Giulio, the Forum Iulii, today's Cividale, a route still in use today. Centuries later, during the late antiquity, waves of people advancing towards Rome forced the construction of defensive barriers in the surrounding valleys, along with which a chain of watchtowers. The hill was almost certainly part of this network, offering a sightline linking Artegna and Arcento. Interestingly, nothing on the hill physically marks what may be the most consequential moment in local history. In 737, the Longobard-controlled diocese of Julium Carnicum was absorbed into that of Aquileia, and Forum Iulii, named Civitas Austriae, became home to the Duke of Friuli, the king and the patriarch alike. Excavations carried out in the more recent years uncovered evidence of a horse shelter built on the hilltop before the year 1000, identifiable from a line of holes in its northern walls that once held a wooden roof in place. These holes are spaced at intervals matching Georgian feet, 0.333 meters, the standard unit of measure during Charlemagne's reign. The hill first appears by name in a document from April 1265, which mentions a hill located in the Brambergo country. Now you see this main building of the castle has very awkward angles, so I'm going back and forth, cutting pieces out that roughly match, then position them on the roof of the building, and understanding where to cut, where to expand, and where to adapt the roof until it is in a shape that is fitable to the building. That's when I take the glue and I immediately glue it on. As you can see, the roofs are finally done and we have a general outline of a basic structure of how the castle will look like at the end. What I forgot was a little entrance tower within the court of the castle that I'm now remeasuring and improvising. This turned out to be a rather challenging building because it has a staircase on the outside leading to the second floor. This staircase on this very small size of 1 centimeter of height is hard to construct and takes a lot of patience. And here we go. The castle has its foundational structures built. The little piece of carton in front of the gallery is going to be the floor part of the gallery itself, which will need to be glued into the gallery at a later stage once everything has been painted. This allows us to continue with the next step, the landscape itself. I have a basic structure, I have the highest point platform. Now it's about getting the landscape into its place. In order to create a landscape, you need multiple levels. of carton. With levels, I do not mean multiple layers, but rather multiple platforms themselves, on which new material can be positioned and creates an interesting topography in which to position the castle to look the whole context of the building more realistic. How am I doing it? I am taking original pictures of today and the past found online as a reference, and I try to recreate the landscape itself. I identify high points and low points, and I try to design this into the basic landscape as you can see here. Each circle or each path is one of those high and low points. What I'm doing now is I take additional carton and I'm trying to cut out those different layers. Once those layers are cut out, I will then be able to put them on steels, and putting everything together, you will see the different platforms carving out a rough topography for the castle to sit on. Now, Prampero seems like an interesting name. Across different areas, the fortress has been recorded under a variety of spellings. Prampersch, Prampergum, Prampero, Prampersch, Prambersch, and finally Prampero, the form that gave the nearby village of Magnano Riviera its name. Linguistically, it is a typonym of German origin, tracking back to when the patriarchs of Aquileia, themselves of German descent, governed Friuli. It merges two medieval German elements, Brand, referring the land cleared through burning, and Berg, a word that shifted in meaning over time from rock to mountain and eventually to castle. The name once designated a trio of features: hill, castle and village, situated in the morainic amphitheater between the Torre and Tagliamente rivers, adjacent to but excluded from Roman-era land surveys. As feudal custom dictated, the geographic name later transformed into the surname of the family, holding the fief, a lineage that has retained ownership of the castle continuously ever since. The family name first surfaces in the historical record in 1130, in a reference to Castello di Prampero. Now, as you can see, the different levels have been carved out, cut out from the carton. Now I'm adding the layers, or the steels on which the platforms will stand, and then create the layers. Usually this I take very simple. I take very simple measurements. The highest platform in this case was 2 centimeters high, so the steels need to be roughly 2 centimeters across the board. The second highest leg was 1.5 centimeters. The last one was between 0.4 and 1 centimeter. Now, putting everything together, you can see different layers emerging. This still looks like stairs rather than a smooth topography, but in the next step we will continue working on smoothing out those edges. For now, this gives us a rough idea of how the hill looks like and the landscape around it that the castle is sitting on. In order to proceed, of course, we need to conclude this step by gluing all the platforms to the basic cardboard base. This allows us to have a stable platform to continue our work on. Now, once this is done, we start smoothing the edges. You will see the final step of smoothing the edges will be working with glue, water and paper to get the maximum smoothness out of it. But working with glue water mix as well as toilet paper is usually rather wet and is not standing on its own, so we need support structures. In order to achieve that, we smooth out the edges first with additional, very improvised cardboard pieces that shall create slopes between the platforms. This is kind of isolating the gaps between the platforms and forms a foundation on which the toilet paper with the glue and water mix then can be positioned on without issues. Especially this part of the process does not have to be precise at all. As you can see, there's numerous awkward angles across the platform. In order to make it look natural, it needs to be rather improvised and as curvy as possible. However, cardboard is a very straightforward material and not curvy by nature, so it is okay if you have gaps and imperfections within the structure. The mix of toilet paper and glue water will fix those imperfections. As a feudal dynasty rooted in Friuli, the Prampero family served in ministerial roles under the Patriarch of Aquileia, beginning the Ghibelline Patriarchy era. Their standing earned them a seat and voice in Friuli's general parliament, a privilege that lasted from the assembly's founding all the way until its dissolution in 1805. Over many generations, the family gave rise to numerous soldiers, scholars, and governing figures of note. Their titles included Count, along with Lordship over Prampero, Ravistagno, and the villages under those domains. The family's heraldry consists of two-toned shields split between silver and black, accompanied by the motto Honor et Virtus, honor and virtue. We have finally arrived at the end of our smoothing out step number 1 with carton board. I'm now cutting off imperfections, excess carton that overlaps the platforms themselves to make it look as smooth as possible. And here we go. We have a basic layout, some landscape structure that allows us to approximate how the final model is going to look like. Now, as you saw, the whole structure looked still rather, let's say, mechanic. It looks a bit like a Minecraft building. we would like to have is as natural look as possible for the landscape and the castle itself. Before continuing with further smoothing out the landscape, I'm adding some decoration material like support steels in the main building, as well as some additional small stone walls that are now part of the landscape. As you can see, I'm continuing with the smoothing process of the platform and the landscape. What I took for that, I mixed glue and water, elements that or instruments that everybody should have at home. And I take toilet paper that hopefully everybody also has at home. And I start gluing this toilet paper across the platform. Now, the more layers of toilet paper you put on a specific position, the smoother the landscape is going to look like. For very annoying edges that really emphasize the original carton foundation structure, you can play around with the toilet paper. You can fold it multiple times, you can curl it up and put it into those angles and niches. This allows you to further smoothen the whole structure. You continue this process until you have reached a level that you're satisfied with the landscape of the castle. Now you let it dry out so that you have a dry platform to work with, and you cut off the excess toilet paper from the sides. This will then give you a final landscape and literally a blank canvas to paint the landscape on. With this, we can continue with the platform itself. We don't want to make it look like as if it was still under construction at the end. So we want to fill those holes on the sides of the platform structure with protective material. For this, we take the carton, we take the layout of the side pieces, and we glue them to the side so that they seemingly merge with the landscape of the model. I add an additional layer of glue for increased stability, and for one side I'm cutting out triangles to function as a support structure for a comparatively weak part of the side protections. And with that, we can continue to the fun part, coloring. This model still needs a lot of work to make it look realistic. For this, I use simple acrylic colors, something you can find in any store next to your place, and I start painting the houses. I take original pictures as a reference for the coloring. Now, as you will see, I start with a rather generic base color, and then I'll continue overpainting the same buildings multiple times with different variations of this specific color mix. This gives it a natural look, a dirty one, something like a wall that has been rained upon, that has suffered environmental damage over centuries. Here, for example, I'm experimenting with some more gray tones on the rather sandstone brown that I had before. And as you will be seeing, I'm not extremely happy with the product itself. It doesn't look at all like the original version of the castle. So I repaint it again with a brighter sand brown with some more grey elements. Now you may ask, I've never heard of this castle in the first place. That may be true, since it's a very small village it is placed in. Documentation from 1279 provides the first formal record of the village that grew up in the shadow of the castle, made up of scattered country dwellings within its territory. A number of these historic structures have survived to the present, now forming part of the Prampero hamlet, itself situated within the municipality of Magnano and Riviera. In order to minimize the waste of color at the end of the day, I'm trying to paint all the areas with similar colors. Clustering those elements allows me to not having to mix and experiment with color mixtures every time I start painting, and it allows me to consume all the colors that I pour out for finishing up. Now on the roofs I chose a reddish orangish basic tone, and I took a very watery white-orange combination of colors of a mixture that I then tried to sprinkle on top of the roofs, giving it a natural tile-alike and erosion influenced roof pattern. Now comes the worst part, the details. The details are nitty-gritty work. I took reference from original pictures to approximately allocate windows and doors on the buildings. I took a pen to roughly position them on each building, and I then continued painting them in brown and black colors, with a pen, but also with acrylic and also pencils. You may have noticed that it's not just about the castle. There is a little chapel right on the side of the entrance of the castle. Below the castle, on the hill's northern face, sits the chapel of Saint Margaret. The 1976 earthquake left it in ruins as well, and it was later reconstructed by the Italian state, reopening its doors to worshippers in 1993. Its design follows a rectangular floor plan topped by a cross-vaulted apse, while the face side is distinguished by a twin-light mullioned window paired with a bell opening, a bifora campanaria in Italian terminology. Devotion drove its original construction. Simone di Prampero, an influential feudal lord with landholdings stretching from Carnia to Istria, commissioned the chapel. Patriarch Markov de Randek had entrusted him with major military, civil and political duties, and Emperor Charles IV later knighted him with the Golden Spur. His son Giacomo Giusto secured the chapel's own income stream in 1409, and by 1413 the building had passed into the joint patronage of the Prampero family's various members. In present times, the chapel operates under the ecclesiastical authority of the Tarcento deanery, functioning both as an active place of worship and a site of cultural significance. As the buildings and the roofs have been painted, I continue to the landscape. I start with the platform, the highest level of the platform on which the castle sits upon, which is a grayish color of stone, and then I continue with the most fun part, the green landscape around the castle. Mostly grass. It had and has some trees in it, something that I have decided to not add to this model to facilitate the complexity. I chose a rather bright green as a base color, and then I continued experimenting with darker colors on top to make it look more natural and diverse in terms of flora. Now we have the complete coloring of the platform itself. It is now ready to be continued to the final phase. We could have glued all the buildings onto the platform from the beginning before painting. However, I decided not to do so, since the painting process, especially on the building, is a very delicate one. I prefer to paint them detached from the platform, allowing me to have easier access to all the parts. Now, in order to make this model look very professional and elegant, I add a black contour on the sides of the platform, making the main colors and the landscape stand out even more. And with that, we are approaching the end of the process. We can now finally glue together all the buildings onto the platform and finalize the model. And with the chapel positioned, we have the final form of our model. But what would be a model without a description of what it contains or displays? So that's why I carved out a final piece of carton. I wrote down the name of the castle. You could potentially also add date descriptions if your model depicts the object in a specific time and place. I decided not to do so. The name will be glued on the side of the platform to have a clear description of the model. And here you go. In the last few minutes, please enjoy the model. I hope you enjoyed the process and you learned something along the way. And I wish you a very good time.